Now, next week, the Princess Diana statue will be unveiled to mark what would have been her 60th birthday. Nearly 25 years on from her untimely death, mystery still surrounds the car crash that claimed her life in a tunnel in Paris. As part of a new 6-part Beyond Reasonable Doubt podcast from Mail Plus, crime writer Stephen Wright has been investigating what happened that night by speaking to the people who were there. Here he is to tell us more.
Starting point was my idea to have a podcast episode, my true crime podcast for Mail Plus, on what happened at Scotland Yard the night Diana died in August '97. I knew one of the officers who was on call that night, Di Davis, no stranger to Palace Confidential. He told me many times over the years, what happened, been woken up out of night, middle of the night rather, going into the Royalty Protection Squad offices to oversee the Met's response to her death. I asked Lord Stevens, the ex-Met Commissioner, whether he would be prepared to do an extended interview about his investigation into Diana's death, Operation Paget. I was aware that Lord Stevens had interviewed Prince Charles in 2005 when he had recently retired as head of the Metropolitan Police. He interviewed him, but I didn't know what really he had put to him in that interview. It made a few hundred words in a Sunday paper, but no one could get to the bottom of it. And it transpires that, and he revealed it in the podcast and in the paper, that he interviewed Prince Charles about a letter, a note that Princess Diana, Princess of Wales, had left in her pantry for her butler, Paul Burrell, in '95, predicting her own death in a car crash orchestrated by Prince Charles. Sounds really far-fetched for that to happen, but of course, when she died 2 years later in a car crash, conspiracy theorists, when they became aware of that, it was a field day for them. Lord Stevens said he had to read out that note that the princess had written to Prince Charles. He had to follow the evidence during his investigation. Look, there were theories that MI6 was involved, the Duke of Edinburgh was involved, the security services in the States were involved, they were eavesdropping on the princess, that she was pregnant, that she was embalmed to hide her pregnancy. I mean, the list was endless. I mean, if this was true, it's the biggest conspiracy ever. And of course, this conspiracy happened in one of the great cities in the world, not in the middle of nowhere. So it was, when you look back on it now, quite farcical, really. But there are people out there who still want to believe that something is far more sinister than a simple car crash involving a man who had drunk too much, Henri Paul, speeding, collided with a white Fiat Uno, whose driver we've tracked down as part of this investigation. That something so simple yet so horrific could cost her life.
Richard, nearly 25 years on, this awful tragedy, it still holds such a lot of intrigue and fascination for so many people. Why do you think that is?
It really does. I mean, there's been so much interest in this. Reports by Stephen Wright and Richard Pendlebury throughout the week, and they've been absolutely fascinating, and people are still so intrigued and more so. And I think programmes such as The Crown have just a whole new generation has become interested in the story of Diana. And because through her sons and through the royal family, that relation's continued, and we see so much influence of her life in so many different areas. She was ahead of her time in so many ways. And so I think it makes next week's unveiling, a really big worldwide event, and it's going to be fascinating to follow.
It is an extraordinary example of living history, isn't it? And actually, it's what, for all our chat and surmise about the royals, you have to take your hat off to each and every one of them, because they are in this gilded cage, but they're also so exposed. And Diana's untimely death, and actually a death we still don't fully understand, is an example of how precious they are, really, and how vulnerable they are. All of us poring and picking over them. And likewise next week, I think all of us need to check ourselves and remember, These are two boys who lost their mother at an extraordinarily young age in a very public way, who now are going through their own domestic crisis. And it's like the pain shifted, but it's not gone.
That's all we have for you on our YouTube show. But to see the rest of this episode, including some more fascinating royal revelations, head to www.mailplus.co.uk/royals or click the link on screen now.